Extra floofy up top here. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to this Virgo season contemplation. You'll see in the live chat, I've doubled the info that I have in the description box so that I can kind of work through the outline here of what we have coming up during Virgo season. And in general, there's a lot happening in earth signs overall. And so, as the sun is going to move through Virgo over the next 30 days or so, August 23rd to September 23rd, there's a lot of notable aspects. So, I'm going to try to give some flavor and context for all of these things, which will be kind of a lot. So, we'll be taking it somewhat quickly through the individual aspects, though, to start us off with a good foundation for this contemplation and to mostly keep coming back and building on this foundation as we go. I want to start with a look at like what is Virgo energy and what is Pisces energy. So those two archetypes, what archetypes are we actually dealing with here? And the first, we're going to compare and contrast these energies because first of all, they're sister signs. So whenever the sun is going to go through Virgo, that means the earth is automatically moving through Pisces. So we're automatically activating both Virgo and Pisces when we have the sun moving through Virgo. So to contrast them to start off with, Virgo and Pisces, how are they different? Virgo is very much related to reality, and Pisces is fantasy. So if we start right there with, Pisces is our imagination, Virgo is our attention to detail in the present moment, our ability to tune our eyes down to the smallest physical detail, warts and all. And so there's that first kind of contradiction is Virgo is reality, it's that earth sign energy, and Pisces is fantasy, it's one of the water signs. Virgo is proactive and Pisces is reactive. I think that could be somewhat said for all of the earth signs compared to all of the water signs, proactive versus reactive. Um, like actively seeking what you want and making it happen, Virgo, or kind of sitting back and letting life come to you, being a receiver or being receptive, being reactive to what's showing up in front of you. So that's a good start as far as grounding us into the earth sign Virgo and the water sign Pisces. And these two, one thing that they have in common is they are both called mutable signs. The other two mutable signs are Gemini and Sagittarius. So these four are the mutable signs. And what that means is that these are the four signs that come at the end of the physical seasons. So as we move from summer, we have the last phase of summer is Virgo, and the end of Virgo season is the beginning of a whole new season. So mutable signs are somewhat multifaceted just by nature because they are a transition phase into what's coming next as much as they are reflecting the end of the cycle that you're just coming off of. So Virgo is very much about like wrapping up, what has Cancer learned and what has Leo learned out of their time over the summer. And now Virgo has some work to do in our daily life, in our routine, in the way that we're choosing to spend our time on a daily basis, weekly basis. Um, we have some updates that we want to make, and mutable signs are really good for that as well. They're very open to change. And Virgo, especially, um, is extremely welcoming of change in that Virgo as an energy is very concerned, like all earth signs are, with effectiveness and practicality. So one of Virgo's top concerns is, does it work? Right? Like we can fantasize and prophesize and guess and, create and do all the things, but like Virgo wants to know, did it work? Virgo is also very tied in with healing, like the healing arts. And you think about like a doctor, isn't trying to just guess and have fun. Like, we're coming off a Leo season, right? Like, where you're just like in your flow and you're being creative and you're doing what comes in the moment. And like, that's not the healing arts. The healing arts is like, we need to know that the medicine worked. The whole point is that it's effective, that it's effective treatment, that it changes whatever it was meant to change. The effectiveness of what it is that we're doing is something that's going to get called into question very early on as we go. Right away, we have the sun opposing Saturn at 3 degrees of Pisces on August 27th. So, just a few days after the sun gets into Virgo, we'll have, or we do have already, Saturn retrograde in Pisces. And by that point, they'll be lining up at 3 degrees, the sun at 3 degrees Virgo and Saturn retrograde at 3 degrees of Pisces. And right away, that's the question, is like, is what you're doing working? Right? Like, there's no judgment in that other than effectiveness. Like, if you spend 8 hours every day, let's just like take a very tangible example and say, like, lose weight. Like, you're spending all this time, all this time, all this time, and like the number on the scale stays the same or like is going up or whatever. Like, and take that example and kind of lay the principle of it on top of whatever it is that you're doing. You're giving a lot of energy and you're not getting what you're trying to get out of it. It's not working. The effort I'm applying isn't reaping the rewards that I need to reap. It's not effective. It's not effective as a method for what I want to have happen. And so there's a willingness to do what works. And if we recognize that something doesn't work, there's that Virgo's willingness to let go of whatever doesn't work. And again, it's like not hard. It's just logical almost, and that makes sense. Virgo's ruled by Mercury. It's somewhat logical that, like, if it doesn't work, stop doing it. But, like, bringing in some compassion here, like, there's a lot of reasons why we do things that don't work. There's a lot of reasons why we kind of play out the old patterns and the patterns where we're comfortable, or this is how we know how to do it. And especially, the earth sign that comes before Virgo is Taurus. That's the first earth sign that we come to in the zodiac, and that's fixed earth. It's very much about like doing what you know works and like sticking to that and not deviating from that recipe. And Virgo has lived more life experience. By the time we get around to Virgo season, we have more information about what works. We have more information about other options. Gemini, we have more information about the impact of what we're doing. Cancer, we have more information about what's fun for us and where our creative flow is trying to take us. Leo. And now here we are in Virgo season, ready and willing to accept the changes that need to be made to get us where we want to go. What do we need to do that works? And that Saturn retrograde in Pisces is really asking us, like, what works for your energy specifically? Like, what, like, psychic hygiene comes to mind here as far as like health of our body. I personally think is an extension of the state of our psychic hygiene, meaning the state of our aura. Like, are we carrying around a lot of extra things that are giving us extra anxiety? We're worrying about things that aren't our responsibility. We're trying to take responsibility for, everything and everyone, trying to be everything to everybody. And because of that, we're ripping ourselves in multiple different directions. And that right there is ineffective. When we let our energy dissipate into all of these different things, when we don't have boundaries, right? Lack of boundaries is somewhat ineffective. Boundaries are good to contain the energy so that when we say no to that and no to that and no to that, it's not that we maybe don't want to do that. Sometimes we have to say no to things that we even do want to do. It's that every no we say is saving energy for what will eventually be our yes. And Virgo energy, again, is an earth sign and is coming off of that last earth sign of Taurus, where in Taurus, and we just got a huge dose of this with the North Node 18-month chapter that we just finished a few months ago, and a couple months ago, a month ago, good Lord. Um, and we have Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus currently. So all of this Taurus energy is basically asking us the question. Plus, we have Taurus's ruler Venus in retrograde in Leo right now. All of that energy is asking you, what is most important to you? What is most important to you personally? And basically, your values. What are your top values? And when I say top values, I'm thinking like two or three things that are the most important guiding principles in your life. And if you don't have an answer to that right away, no big deal. There is a values exercise um, linked in the description. And if it's not, I'll put it there after this. But highly recommend spending a little bit of time getting super clear on your values, because that is ultimately how we take our values into Virgo. And now Virgo is the part where we are going to decide, how are we allocating time on a daily basis? How do we build a daily routine for ourselves or a weekly routine for ourselves so that we are the living representation of our values? So it's not random. Like, making up a routine is not random. It's not arbitrary, and it's not something that we can just download off the internet. Like, here's a great morning routine or whatever. Like, ultimately, okay, so this is another way to look at Virgo energy is to go into human design and look at the gates that are along the Virgo part of the spectrum. And I listed them here, the human design and gene keys gates that are on Virgo. The cusp of Leo and Virgo is gate 29. And that's the one that just came to mind, is like, when we step into Virgo energy, we're coming off of the tail end of Leo. And we have this part of us that wants to get the most that we can out of life, period. And that's what we want. And the gift of the 29th gate is commitment. And so the question with your daily routine is like, what are you committed to? And the answer of what you're committed to is largely informed by your values. So it's like, if you're committed to, I'm going to spend an hour every morning um, doing journaling and listening to content and whatever, like, it's like, that's the commitment that I'm going to make. But the reason that I'm doing that is because my own mental health is one of my highest values. So taking your values and breaking them down into, okay, so then, given that that's what's most important to you, what are the commitments for what you're going to make, that commitment to do that every day or every week? Another example of this, um, and this is flash forwarding a little bit to the question that came through for the Virgo new moon. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but since that's happening at the tail end of the season. But Virgo energy in general is like, the reason that you show up and do what you do on a daily basis through Virgo energy, it really doesn't have much to do with money, although often it is. Our daily routine like has a lot to do with how we make our money or how we end up getting paid. Um, and so it can be like, how are you surviving? How are you sustaining your life? That's part of what we have to do through our daily routine. Um, but typically within our Virgo service, there is far more far more that we're wanting to be paid with than just money. Like, again, I go back to Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is very easily bored. So, one of the ways that Virgo likes to be paid is in growth. Virgo likes to hone its skills and get better and better and better and better at its craft. Like, that's satisfying for Virgo energy, is like finding these little shortcuts or little like updates that are more efficient in your process, or like whatever it is that like lets you get better and better and better at taking the resources that you have and making as much positive impact in your community as possible. And the the question that came through for the Virgo new moon contemplation is, if you had all the money you needed forever, like, basically take money out of the equation, as far as like, we need money to buy food and housing, and like, it takes a certain level of money to survive on the planet. So like, let's say that you had not only enough money to survive, but enough money to like basically do whatever you wanted to do. Like you like to travel, you like to, have this car, you like to go this place, you like to give this away, you like to whatever. You have enough money for all of that. Like you don't need money. So put ourselves in that space if you can, as best we can. Most of us have a really hard time um, taking money out of the equation. But if you did, what then? What then would you want to show up and do with your time? And how much time would you want to spend doing it? So these are really fun questions to ask, I think, because especially during Virgo season and really coming off of Leo season too, it's like, you know, well, we're in the Leo new moon cycle right now. At the time I'm recording this, we just had the Leo new moon a couple days ago. And that is really about like your heart's desire, your inner child, you know, the part of us, our inner child, where like we haven't talked ourselves out of what we want. We just want what we want and, you know, don't know any better to like question what we want. So coming off of that Leo new moon of like, yeah, what do you want? What do you desire? What do you want your life to be? What makes you feel alive? And that is the question for the next like 28 days under this Leo new moon cycle. And so then it's like, okay, so what you're going to do on a daily basis, hopefully, is what makes your inner child feel alive. What, that's like that synergy of kind of that gate 29 of moving out of like, okay, so now that we know that this is what lights up our inner child, gate 29, that cusp of Leo and Virgo, okay, so then what commitments are you going to make? I'm going to spend 5 hours a week doing this because I value this, because this lights me up. I'm going to spend 5 hours a week doing it no matter what for the rest of my life. And, like the rest of our lives, like depending on what kind of energy you're wired with may feel like an impossible amount of time. I personally have a hard time with like lifelong commitments because I do carry so much mutable energy and I love change. So I like to, kind of leave myself a little bit of hedge room here where I can like I'm going to do it as long as it's what lights me up and as long as it's what my inner child finds fun. And if ever, I evolve and that's no longer that and it's now something different, now I'm going to do that. That's my commitment is that I'm going to let my inner child have a really prominent seat at the table and to share with me what they want and what they're lit up by and follow that commitment towards like, okay, so then what am I going to do on a daily basis? And one of the commitments that I recently made within the last few months was like I was having this contemplation of basically like what I saw, the vision I saw was my YouTube, this channel, Owning Authenticity, suddenly getting really popular, like suddenly and really popular to the point where like it was easily generating several $1,000s a month in ad revenue. And that would really be something because that would probably be like hundreds of thousands of views. I mean, that's the kind of traffic that that would take to generate just a few $1,000s, just to give you an idea. But that's what I saw. And so I was like, okay, so now I'm in this landscape of all the money I ever need is coming off of like not even work necessarily, like total play, total self care, total like energy management on my part, like me teaching, me channeling, me telling stories like that is energy management for me. I have to engage in that behavior. So it's just a matter of what am I going to talk about, And this is the most fun thing to talk about. So I choose astrology. So if I was making all the money that I needed off of doing this, then my question was, what would my relationship be with my current work? And my current work, like where my money comes from now, is more out of my grocery work and my store and my stores and my consulting work. And so, and I do maybe like 20 hours a week because that's what I need to work to pay my bills basically. And I don't need more money than that to pay my monthly bills. So I don't work more than that right now. That's a choice that I made. And then here's this, like, okay, so if your monthly bills were paid for and you didn't need to do 20 hours to pay your bills, so then how much would you want to give? Would you still want to give? What is your relationship with your current work? Are you there for the money? Would you stop doing it if you had all the money you needed? And if that's the case, no big deal. But like mine was kind of twofold. Number one, independent grocery is the industry that my business falls under and my consulting work. And so independent grocery is valuable enough to me. I value this industry and what it does as far as raising the quality of life on this planet for lots and lots of people who live in rural places. Independent grocery is worth me investing my time every week for the rest of my life, no matter how much money I have. I want to give some time to improving this industry every week. And then it's like, okay, so how much time would you want to spend? And the answer I came to was 5 hours. I want to spend 5 hours a week on independent grocery for free, basically, because I don't need the money from it at all. And okay, so if I was going to give 5 hours a week, this is like the whole exercise, like talking you all the way through. If I was going to give 5 hours a week for the rest of my life, what is the most fun way I can think to do that? Is it what I'm doing right now? Because what I'm doing right now falls much more under the vein of like kind of one store at a time, like helping one store at a time or getting one store at a time open or like whatever, like one community at a time. Um, is that what I would want to do for 5 hours a week? Because if I was doing 5 hours a week on one store at a time, like it would take years to make an impact with that one store. And so what I saw was, no, I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm doing what I'm doing right now because it's the job I could get, basically, was the realization that I came to through that. And if I was going to design, like bespoke to myself, design my 5 hours a week contribution to independent grocery, I would make a podcast where I would, yeah, feature cool people who are doing cool work on this planet and talk a lot about grocery, the grocery industry, food access, supporting local businesses, on and on and on. Like I can cover all of that under this umbrella. And at that point, maybe I'm able to impact lots of communities all from the space of 5 hours a week. And maybe someday that podcast, which I've recorded 4 episodes now, maybe someday that podcast has a financial revenue stream of its own, but that's not where the inspiration came from. It came from, this is so valuable. I want to spend my time working on it because it matters. It's meaningful. And I have a skill set that can contribute in a meaningful way to this industry that I personally have a connection with. So, all of that to come back to this question of if you had all the money you ever needed, what would you be doing with your time? And what would it look like to go ahead and start moving in that direction, even if only an hour a week, an hour a day, whatever that looks like, to start living that commitment of your values, start being a more regular embodiment of your values. So that that question obviously wanted to come out a little faster. So I want to go back to Virgo season in general and Virgo energy in general. And this is actually a comparison point between Virgo and Pisces, where they both have the superpower to set aside their own personal ego and connect to something bigger than themselves in a meaningful way. So, egoless is not quite accurate because technically we're all 12 of the zodiac archetypes. So, none of us are without ego. We all have an ego somewhere inside of us. But let's say you had a ton of Virgo Pisces energy, you may well resonate with feeling somewhat egoless or selfless. Um, this Aries North Node chapter may be extra difficult for someone who resonates as selfless, as far as like the Aries North Node. That's exactly what it wants from us, is to step more fully into ourselves. So Virgo season in general could be a little bit interesting, as far as, that Virgo sun and Pisces earth are melting the ego kind of out of the picture. And I don't want to glorify, setting your ego aside. I'm not trying to say that ego isn't valuable, or like that it's noble to be selfless, because I personally don't believe that. So I don't want to like paint that picture. But, you know, at a certain point, it's informative to, again, it's effective to take your ego out of the equation and like kind of take a step back and look at, in a very analytical, detached kind of scientific, mathematical way, as far as these are the skills that I personally possess, and this is the landscape that I'm dealing with, and here's how I can see those two things fitting together. And the reason I say it's helpful to take your ego out of it is that sometimes the ego can be really afraid of being seen and being exposed or scrutinized or opened up to criticism, or, lots of opposing viewpoints. And with Virgo energy, when you take the ego out of it, what you have, well, Virgo and Pisces, when you take the ego out of it, what you have left is humility. You have the ability to be seen and be heard for the good of the cause that you're working on behalf of. You have the humility to receive criticism in a way that says, number one, are you my mentor? Do I respect your opinion? Do I respect your experience in this field? Because if I do, criticism is actually the most effective thing you can give me, right? To hone my craft, because it's Virgo energy. And that's ultimately what we want. We want to be the most effective being we can be, to take our resources and stretch them as far as they can. I I'm a Virgo South Node, and I have my Black Moon Lilith in Virgo. And I have this past life memory, is what it feels like, of being a doctor and being on a battlefield, and I'm the only doctor on the whole battlefield. And there are all of these soldiers wailing with, missing limbs and just shattered bodies all around me, like just as far as the eye can see on this battlefield. And they're all screaming for help. And I'm the only doctor, and I only have these two hands. And so the effectiveness and the efficiency that drives Virgo energy is coming from that place of like, these are the only resources I have, are these two hands, right? This time in the day, these 24 hours. We all, in the earth realm, in the 3D, the earth signs know this best. We are all subject to limited resources. And so effectiveness and efficiency means, when you come down to the wire in a situation like that, it means if I can be more efficient with my time, like I can save 2 minutes on this patient, I can get over here to this patient 2 minutes faster. And I can save some of their blood inside their body and maybe give them a better survival rate. And I have this medicine that I know how to use. And so that's making this process more efficient. And so that's letting me get to the next person a minute faster than I would have if I didn't have that medicine to help me. So, like, the effectiveness and the efficiency is about stretching the resources as far as they will go, because it's important. It matters. And that's where, again, I keep driving us back to Taurus energy and your values and what matters to you, because getting criticized, getting told you could do it better, nope, not good enough yet, like getting told that, if you don't even care about being there in the first place, you're like, get away from me. Like, I don't want this, right? But like, if it's something where, no, I want to be the best I can be because I personally am invested in this. This is what feels like my personal calling. to take my skills and develop them in this way and point them at this subject. That feels right to me. And then having a mentor, having somebody's opinion that you trust tell you that you would be more effective, you would shave some time off of your process if you did it like this, or if we practice this technique, or have you ever seen this tool? Let me introduce you to this. You take it and you do this and you put it like that. And look, now you saved an hour. I would love for my process to be criticized if the outcome is I am a more effective being in my craft, right? So the humility that we gain by setting our ego aside is incredibly powerful. So I also set it down into context here as far as Virgo being the sixth sign in the zodiac. So check it out. Like we've had almost half the journey of the zodiac before we ever ask ourselves to set our ego aside, right? So, like, what I mean by that is the first place we start with our life force spark is Aries. It's like the spark of our ego. That's the basis of our entry into this life is ego. It's like our own personal individual identity. So like that's unavoidable. That's where we begin. And then we come into, yeah, like what are you hungry for? What's important to you? What kind of an appetite do you have that feels like it needs to be satiated? And everybody has different appetites, right? Like we can understand our appetites a little better by looking at our individual Venus sign. I say that because my Venus in Gemini, one of the appetites that is the most compelling in my life is the appetite for learning, the appetite for absorbing new information. I have four planets in Gemini. And so like your Venus can show you, what are you hungry for? What's really important to you? And that can honestly take a lifetime to sort through all of the frequencies of Taurus energy to find like what's important to you personally, not just what's important to like the environment that you were born into. Gemini, I mean, even though it's an air sign, I think air energy honestly has quite a bit of ego to it because that curiosity is unique to you. Your curiosity is unique to you. Everybody is curious about something different. And that goes back to our Mercury sign. Like what what is your mind uniquely attuned to? What frequencies are you normally swimming in? And that's again, it's different to everybody. And then Cancer energy, how do your emotions feel inside your body? So again, like we've spent all of this like just talking about you personally. We want to know who you are first, second, third, fourth, and then fifth, it's like we follow that up with another fire sign, with another big dose of ego to be like, okay, so what feels like play? What feels like fun? What if you were going to be the most selfish creature in the entire world, what would your heart desire? If nobody else existed in the entire world, what would your heart desire? All wishes granted, what would you want? So again, like we have so many doses of self discovery and self identity and grounding into who we are as individuals. And then what do? We take our individual self and we put it to the side and we open up to something bigger happening around us. Virgo is like that sense of service to the community. Like if you think more back towards, I mean, I guess we still kind of have this going on. Like, you know, not everybody has the same job. Like we need people who are teachers, we need people who milk cows, we need people who fix the electrical pole, we need people who like run the city government, like we need people who do all of these different things. And Virgo, that Mercury ruled sign is about like okay, so what is your mind wired for? What kind of a perspective and an intellect do you have to bring to the group, the collective? And I'm hearing in my mind that, like, oh, I don't have an intellect or like I'm not smart. I don't have skills. Dude, dude, everybody's got skills. Everybody's got intellect. Um, that's where I think maybe one of the shadows of Virgo is we trusted the wrong mentor. somewhere along the way. We let somebody teach us some things about ourselves that weren't fucking true. And one of them was, you know, I know several people who, I wonder if this is my Chiron in Gemini. I don't know, but I know several people who grew up in situations where their parents thought they were slow, where they were like in the slow kids class. And that's no offense to slow kids, but like, I mean, knowing them as an adult, I'm like, they're one of the smartest freaking people I know. And what? Like, it's just bizarre how, somebody whose intellect works very differently from ours can totally misunderstand what we have going on. And so I think like, or there's also that Albert Einstein quote of like, if you judge a fish his whole life by his ability to climb a tree, he'll always think he's stupid. I'm like, that's another one where, yeah, like if we trusted the wrong mentor, if we respected the wrong mentor and we allowed that person to teach us things, which I mean, if you think about before age 7, mostly the adult figure in our life got that job of mentor for us. That was our first mentor, was our parent. And they taught us all kinds of things about our lives and about ourselves. And not all of it was true. A lot of it was filled with their own misunderstandings. And so, not that they like maliciously led us astray or anything, but that they did the best they could. And that possibly they didn't really understand the full range of what we were capable of. And so one of the key pillars to that Virgo archetype is that mentor protege relationship where you do seek out someone you truly admire, someone you truly trust and respect. And let me tell you what, like, even that doesn't mean that this person has all your answers, doesn't mean that this person is going to be able to like walk you all the way there. um, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make in our world today is really delegating the role of authority to somebody else. And that can include a mentor where we want them to just show us how, to just tell us how to do it, just tell us what's right, whatever that is. And really like the mentor's role is to develop the student, to develop our character, to develop our skill set. And at the end of the day, it's for the student to recognize like when you've transcended the mentor, when the mentor is no longer able to provide useful guidance because you've absorbed everything that they had to teach you. I think that's like the healthiest outcome of any mentor protege relationship is that it ends. Like it needs to come to a close where they gave me everything they could and now I'm processing that inside myself and looking for the next mentor who may have different things to teach me. There's also this side of it where, so like that's like kind of being a protege and seeking out mentor after mentor after mentor. And I personally, again, as a Virgo South node, big fan of having people teach you one on one, which is essentially what a mentor is like personalized teaching, which is so freaking valuable if the person has benevolent intentions. And I've had very good karma, honestly, with working with multiple different mentors who did have good intentions, and I outgrew them. And some of them handled that better than others. Like some of them like had proteges where they like had been the protege for like 8 years. I'm like, wow. And I mean, I guess I shouldn't judge. I mean, I guess everybody has, I mean, a different path and a different amount to learn, a different thing to learn. So it makes sense that like maybe that particular person had more to teach that other student than they had to teach me. But yeah, I think, you know, on the protege side, there's nothing wrong with getting guidance and input. And if you want to be a master, whatever, go find a current master and ask them, like, how'd you get there? What mistakes did you make along the way that learned pretty quickly? Don't do it like that. Like, what was the consequence of those mistakes? Like, what do you wish somebody had told you before you got started? Like, ask those questions and benefit from getting to learn from somebody else's mistakes. That mentorship opportunity can be an accelerator in you honing your craft and being a more effective being more quickly, more expedited. The other side of it too is at a certain point, basically feeling like you are so well resourced in your own environment, in your own craft, that you yourself step into the mentorship role, that like you take on a protege. You turn around and, the same way that the master was able to grab your hand and like pull you up over the fence, you turn around and grab the next person's hand and pull them up over the fence. And again, in Virgo, we have the superpower of setting our ego aside. And what that means is I always think of I have a Leo moon. And so I have a pretty strong ego inside of myself, I would say. And like in a good way, I think. And the thing about the mentor protege relationship that I could see really requiring some humility is when the student becomes like a greater master than their previous master. And again, I think that is best case scenario, right? Like it's the shadow of the mentor. Nothing is good or bad. It's the shadow of the mentor to want to keep their student in the protege position, meaning like, no, you have more to learn from me. And there's an ego trip in that says like, I need you to validate me as valuable because I have something to teach you. So there's a lot to say here about like taking our ego out of the equation and being however big we need to be, right? Like being willing to do whatever it takes to serve the cause that feels worthy to us. And that may mean facing some fears. That may mean sacrificing parts of yourself or parts of your personal comfort zone, I would say, and putting yourself in situations that aren't exactly comfortable, but they're valuable for what you ultimately want to do, what your contribution hopefully will be by the end of it. So that's quite a lot of things around Virgo season and the Pisces full moon. So we'll come to that next. Um, I So with the Pisces energy being like, again, that's fantasy, it's receptive. On the light side, Pisces is transcendence over suffering. It's being connected to a higher power that makes sense out of existential crisis and crisis in general. In the light side, it's compassion. And when you put Virgo and Pisces together in the lightest frequencies, there's compassion in action, right? Like Pisces has compassion, Virgo has action. Pisces all by itself lacks action, so can veer towards passivity, meaning you have compassion, but you don't demonstrate it, basically. But on the Virgo side, you can have all action and no compassion, which at that point, like, yeah, that can do damage all by itself. But when you bring the two together, you have compassion and action, which is really beautiful. Um, Pisces is also where we merge back into the infinite, where we swim in the waters of the all, where we merge back into the root of our soul, and depending on how you wanna think about that, I personally think that, we're each extensions of source energy, that we're each individual extensions of God itself, experiencing itself as me and you and them and the kitty and the tree and the everything in life is God experiencing itself in that form. And so in Pisces, in the highest frequency of Pisces, we recognize ourselves as God. And in the lower frequencies of that same energy, we are the victim of all of the things that happen to us in this world. It's like the quintessential life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And, are you the victim or are you God? in human form, creating this life so that you can have this experience. Pisces is love, and on the shadow of that is confusion. Pisces is radical acceptance, and on the shadow of that is escapism and numbing. And that's an interesting aspect as far as the Pisces full moon, the full moon being the time of the month where the moon is at its most full, it's at its most bright, it's most illuminated. It's actually this month, the month of August, we started the month with a full moon and we're ending the month with a full moon. So this Pisces full moon is the second full moon of the month of August. And what will be eliminated, I think, is our connection to our higher power. And for better or for worse, like either, on the highest end of the frequency, there's an even an even more lit up, integrated understanding of yourself as God. That's one possibility of the Pisces full moon. And on the other end, there is potentially a bit of a breaking point moment through suffering, where the suffering is so intense that transcendence becomes the only option that there is. That I was watching something this morning about spiritual bypassing, and I think this is interesting as far as kind of tying into the Virgo effectiveness conversation, tying into the Saturn and Pisces conversation of, again, like what works, and spiritual bypassing just like doesn't fucking work. Like it just doesn't do anything helpful to pretend that everything is light and love. It's such a disservice to ourselves for when we do encounter the true difficulty of the human experience. If all we have to go on is light and love, and then we're face to face with darkness and tragedy, crisis of some kind, that is the sense of like, do you have a connection to a higher power to be able to pull from, to resource yourself in the face of something truly terrifying or unknown, or which the unknown is usually the terrifying part. um, are you able to resource yourself through your connection to your own higher power, or are you lost under the tide of suffering? And in the spiritual bypassing thing that I was watching, I'll link it in the description. It was on Mark Vicente's podcast. But he was talking about how, based on his experience and his travels and all that, that he has come to understand that, suffering only comes from trying to avoid pain, that like pain is inevitable, suffering is not. And what do we mean by that? Like if you accept pain, right? If we have radical acceptance for our humanity, meaning we accept pain is going to be part of it, that there is no suffering in that, because there isn't any sense of like it should be different than this, right? The suffering comes from the rejection of what is, the rejection of what's real. And this is not easy, right? Like this is a practice, but essentially escapism and numbing is avoiding pain. And that was something that I saw in something else that I watched. And what was that? It was Mark Manson, the guy who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. He was on Lewis Howe's podcast, The School of Greatness, I think is what that one is. Um, and Mark was explaining, he has multiple planets in Scorpio, by the way, 1984 birth. But Mark was explaining how most of what we think in life is really complicated is actually really simple. It's just really painful. And the complication that we give to things is us trying to avoid the pain of it. It's not complicated, it's painful. And if you don't, like, if you can't endure or you can't experience the pain, and you have to figure out how to get from, point A to point B, how to get to the other side without actually experiencing the experience of going to the other side. You're like trying to figure out how to teleport yourself there. It's like all of a sudden, like drug addictions, food addictions, like social media addictions, like makes so much more sense. We're trying to get to the other side without actually taking the journey and the experience of it. We're trying to numb out the pain of what it means to grow and evolve and move to the other side. And so I think this Pisces full moon, like what is being illuminated is, again, the state of our psychic hygiene and how well our psychic hygiene practices are working to keep our psychic immune system online for when we need it. Because when we bump into the unknown, when we bump into fear or uncertainty or change, where again there's uncertainty because we don't know what's coming, we're having to let go of what we know and we don't yet have something else to fill it in with, that like terrifying blank slate moment of kind of the in between. um, that can be when we reach for the numbing, we reach for the certainty, we reach for, the shadow of Virgo is over analytical, of like, you're so analytical, you're giving yourself anxiety and panic attacks and you can't sleep and your physical health is deteriorating because again, you're worrying about trying to solve all the things. And that in and of itself is pain avoidance. Like, I don't want to experience the pain of getting caught off guard. I don't want to experience the pain of being criticized. And again, it's like that superpower between Virgo and Pisces of setting our ego to the side and realizing that, like, we're just human, right? Like, we're just figuring it out like everybody else. Everybody's just regular, including us. So we're going to do our best. And sometimes that means that we'll have a lesson to learn along the way here and there. And sometimes we hurt ourselves. Sometimes we fall down. Sometimes our experiment blows up in our face and singes our eyebrows off. Like, this is life. And leaning away from the experience of it, leaning away from the pain of it, means that the word that's coming is that we stagnate. We we start, I I think that's, yeah, stagnation is essentially death. Like, we're either growing or we're dying kind of thing. And Virgo energy is extremely devoted, extremely devoted to growth and becoming as effective a being as we can possibly be in this world. And so when we experience pain, like, what are you supposed to do with that? If you're not supposed to escape it, if you're not supposed to numb it, what do we do with pain? We let it transform us. We let it break our hearts. We let it shatter the person we were before. And in the shattering of the person we were before, we will reform. The pieces will get put back together. The phoenix will rise from the ashes. It always does. And we ourselves will be evolved. We will be transformed, alchemized through the pain of that experience. And what does that mean? Like, I asked my archetype cards, show me a few archetypes that might come up and be helpful during this contemplation. And they're so Pisces Virgo. I mean, maybe we'll get to all of them, but for sure, the first one that wants to come out is victim. And again, like, are you God, or are you the victim of every bad thing that could ever happen in the entire world? But like, the pain of knowing what it is to be a victim, like, where's the light in that, right? Like, you might be wondering. And Carolyn Meese defines it as the light attribute of the victim archetype is that it prevents you from letting yourself be victimized or from victimizing others. So when we, like in that example, let's say, if we run from the pain of like being in denial, I'm not a victim. And because we're in denial of being a victim, that's our way of separating ourselves from the pain, of escaping the pain, of having our rights trampled, of having our boundaries crossed. if we're in denial, the pain doesn't go away. It only gets shoved into the shadow. And the shadow of the victim, right? Like if we're going to be in denial that we were victimized in this example, if we're denying that pain, we send that pain into our shadow, and then it manifests as playing the victim for positive feedback in the form of pity and inability to maintain personal boundaries. Like almost like if you won't accept that you're the victim, then you really are the victim. Like there's such medicine in that radical acceptance of the pain that allows for the pain to be transcended. And I hope that makes some sense. I feel like it does in my mind, and I hope it does for you too. Ooh. Yeah, so in general, Pisces energy, I think one of the highest frequencies is that we are the radical receiver in our life, like from our higher power. I have a Pisces North Node, and what I understand about a Pisces North Node is that essentially you're here to receive. You're here to realize that Virgo is all about resourcefulness and effectiveness and all of that, and Pisces is too. Pisces also wants to be as resourceful as possible and to be as effective as possible. And in the realm of Pisces, we take off the limitations of the 3D. We take away the limitation of the ego. We take away any physical limitation at all. And we receive the full support, the full power from our God self, from universal support, cosmic forces. Basically, through Pisces energy, we figure out how to harness those and add them to the resources that we have at our disposal. So, like in Virgo energy, with the sun in Virgo and the moon in Pisces for that Pisces full moon, like the sun wants to be as effective as possible. It's like a prayer to the universe, like, put me in, coach. I know there's a lot riding on it, but I can totally do it. I can do it. And like wanting to serve and wanting to be effective and wanting to help and, take care of people in a meaningful way. Um, the Virgo sun wants that. And then this Pisces moon is like, okay, so, open yourself up, really partner with your higher power and allow them to work on your behalf, however you understand that. Like a few examples might be pre-paving, where that's one of the things that I'll often ask my spiritual support to do for me is pre-pave this for me. Like, for example, dude, you can have whatever you want. You can apply it to whatever you want. I was like, you know what I want is I want to go to Taco Bell and I want the chalupa shells to be fresh. I recently learned that when they need to make two of them, they make six. And then the ones that got made, they're just sitting there. And so if they've been sitting there a while, they're not great. And what I wanted was fresh chalupa shells. And so what I asked for my spiritual support was like, hey, pre-pave it for me so that when I roll up at the drive-through window at Taco Bell, I get there in the timing where I can't help but rendezvous straight into fresh chalupa shells. So that's like a very silly example, obviously, but let me tell you what, they were delicious. They were. And I got there right on time. I pull up and there's like two cars in front of me. And instantly I was grateful because I was like, oh, look, like they're going to take the old chalupa shells, or maybe like they're ordering chalupas and they're making the fresh ones. And now I'll get fresh ones real fast, even. I don't even have to wait. Like pre-paving, it's a beautiful thing. Ask your spiritual support to line you up timing wise with exactly what it is that you want. So that's number one. Number two is delegating to the universe to take your to-do list and be like, universe, I need you to make progress on all of these things today. And then you leave the universe to its work. And what starts to happen is like the next day you log into your email and like here's like two loops that got closed because somebody else sent you the question or the answer to your question without you ever having to ask. Like, oh, hey, I forgot to send you like XYZ. Here it is attached. And it's like, thanks. Like, cross that off my to do list to ask so and so for that report they forgot to send me. Like, they remembered. right? They remembered and they had the idea, or I really wanted to reach out to somebody and here it is, a text message from them saying like, "Hey, I really want to see you. Are you free next Thursday?" Like, you know, life will do so much of the effort for us if we will allow ourselves to receive it like that. And I think one of the Virgo shadows is that it is very earth oriented, and we can slip into a place where we're under the faulty, limited belief that we are limited in the earth realm, that we do only have these two hands and we do only have 24 hours in a day. And if we're not making it happen, then it's not going to happen. And that's just never true because we're constantly connected to our spiritual support. So being a radical receiver, like opening up and really trusting your own personal connection to your higher power to assist you in having whatever it is that you want, in making whatever kind of contribution it is that you want, um, really using your own higher power as one of the tools in your toolbox, one of your resources that can be called upon and applied to whatever situation it is that you're facing. So that's the Pisces full moon. Let's see what else we have in here. So the next notable aspect, well, these are two. So, like I said, there's a lot going on in earth signs, and both Jupiter and Uranus are both in Taurus. And so on September 8th and September, well, I think it's like the 8th through the 16th, um, we have the sun making trines back to first Jupiter starting around the 8th. And then later on, about a week later, the sun will be an exact trine to Uranus. So, again, the connection between what is most valuable to you personally, so important. And then the sun, like that focus and that illumination in Virgo is really like bringing in and planting the seeds and cultivating the intentions going into that Virgo new moon of what is it that you want to commit to? What is it that you find so important you would do it every day, whether anyone knew about it, whether you ever got paid for it, whether you ever got a thank you or an appreciation of some kind? Like, you're only doing it because this is how you feel called to serve. Like, what is so important you would devote your life to it in that way? And that can be anything. Like I said, like one of my commitments is to following my inner child around, like that doesn't sound like I'm saving the universe. That doesn't sound like I'm serving anyone but myself, other than that commitment has the understanding, like underneath of it, that knows that my inner child is holding my map. I know that. And so that's why I'm committed to following my inner child and following what's fun for my inner child, what feels like play for my inner child, and trusting that that will guide my way. I'm doing that because I understand the inner child has the map. And then all I have to do is follow my commitment, right? Like it's so simple, so simple, theoretically. So let us see here. So new moon in Virgo is September 14th. So at the time of the new moon in Virgo, we'll have the sun kind of in between its trines with Jupiter, with Uranus. So very activated earth energy at the time of this Virgo new moon. And the other aspect that's just a few days later is both the Virgo sun will oppose Neptune in Pisces on September 19th. And then on the 21st, the sun will trine Pluto in Capricorn. And Pluto in Capricorn, I am going to spend just a little bit of time talking about, where we have Pluto finishing up its last few months of a 15-year process. So in January of 2024, Pluto will move into Aquarius for 20 years, and that will wrap up Pluto's time in Capricorn, won't go back for another 240 years. So what we are taking through this Pluto and Capricorn portal, this 15-year process, is wanting to demolish any structures of our physical world that do not support individual self-empowerment. If it doesn't support individual self-empowerment, it is not allowed to exist in the new world, in the new world, in the new earth. Individual self-empowerment is the basis of the new earth. And so this Pluto and Capricorn process is clearing away anything standing in the way of every single individual on the planet coming into their power. Thank you. Thank you so much. Even though Pluto and Capricorn is a bit of a tower type energy, meaning the things that don't support your self empowerment, they'll crumble and they'll fall away. There's nothing we can do to save them. They're not meant to exist. They're not sustainable. They're not supportive of this individual self empowerment, like what we're moving into in this new phase of our human consciousness. So, this final Pluto retrograde in Capricorn is kind of one last look at the way your life is structured, the structures that you're participating in, the structures that you give your life force energy to, the things that you are devoted and committed to, right? We've built in the earth signs off of our values being established in Taurus, our daily routines meant to embody those values, Virgo. And then up here, we have kind of like this overarching effect of the legacy, the impact, the Capricorn's kind of like a fatherly archetype, like ultimately wanting to support the nurturing and growth of those under its charge, right? Like Pluto in Capricorn is clearing the way for a new kind of individual to emerge that I think we're definitely going to get to see as Pluto does its 20-year process in Aquarius. But all of that is coming together with this Virgo sun at the tail end of Virgo season when the sun trines Pluto at 27 degrees Capricorn, September 21st. The other thing to say about 27 degrees Capricorn is that's where the US Pluto is located. So the Pluto return of the US, meaning Pluto went all the way around from when the US was first formed. Pluto was at 27 degrees. 249-ish years later, Pluto has gone all the way back around and is now for one of its last time, it's on 27 degrees. It's covered this degree point a few times as it goes forward and backwards in its retrograde. And this sun trining the Pluto, I think, could have some interesting impacts playing out for the US specifically. I mean, the global economy is so globalized that, and the US is like so well integrated into that, that absolutely the repercussions of what's going to happen in the US could play out on a global scale. But I see kind of the nexus point, the inception point of whatever this is, like coming kind of starting from the US and somewhat shattering some kind of institutional power, some kind of our previous way of relating to authority must die so that we can become our own authority. That is again part of this new earth of like external authority no longer exists. Every single individual is equipped with their own internal authority system, and we are not meant to trust the authority of an outside figure. We are sovereign beings. And the sun in Virgo, illuminating our daily routine, illuminating, how do we survive on this planet? What are we doing to get paid? Trining this Pluto and Capricorn, I can see that, there are still things that each of us is participating with that need to be cleared away so that we can step more fully into our power. Pluto is not, there's a lot out there of fear-based thinking around Pluto, but I don't think it's malefic at all. If anything, it's like one of the most benefic planets we have because it will not tolerate your disempowerment. It just won't. It'll take everything that's disempowering you and throw it in the fire. Won't think twice about it. I'm like, thank you, Pluto. One of my freaking favorites. So that will take us through the end of Virgo season. Libra season will start on September 23rd. I will be back with a Libra season contemplation on September 15th. I think, actually, let me just double check that real quick. Yes, September 15th. So it'll be a little over a week before the um, Libra season starts, but that is how it's landing. So, yes, September 15th will be my next live stream where we will take a look ahead at Libra season. I'm also going to hang out for just a second and read through the couple things in the chat. If there's anything else I want to add, I'll add it, and then we will wrap it up for today. Yeah. Andrea says, my appetite lately has been to naturally healthy without fighting my body, to listen to it and do and be in a way that brings me most joy. I love that. And I love, you know, the Uranus and Jupiter and Pluto influences on this Virgo sun. All of the other earth energies are very, very dynamic and very much breaking the mold. Even Jupiter wants us to expand beyond where we've been before. Uranus and Pluto will both, like, again, like, they're our ride or die, protect the soft meat of the individual deep inside of you having everything that it wants. Like, it'll knock apart anything that's standing in your way. And one of the things that is standing in a lot of people's way is diet culture. This fixed idea we have of what is healthy and how many people are making money as like like hustling in diet culture and like wanting to teach other people how to be healthy. And I just personally think that that is like 100% not even possible. Like, our intuition is the only diet coach we ever need to listen to. My relationship with this formed out of experience because when I lived in Dallas, there was like a health and wellness culture that I would say was bordered into like the shadow side of health and wellness, like obsessively. Um, like, now you're stressed about your health. Like, that's like fucking defeating the whole point. Obsessive about health. And so that was like the Dallas culture. And in that culture, I ended up gaining a bunch of weight when I first got there, and then I lost even more weight and ended up, like, by the time I left, I was like 20 pounds lighter than when I had gotten there. And at that weight of my skinniest in my adult life, in my life ever, I'm pretty sure. Like, I was like 20 pounds skinnier than I was in high school. Like, that's when I left Dallas, and my health was the worst it's ever been. I was having blood sugar crashes multiple times a day. I I mean, I was like a size 2 and, like, no fat on my body, and I was winning according to, like, the physical version of what we think health looks like. I could run a long ways. I did a half marathon. Like, again, like, I was checking all the boxes of this is what health is, diet, exercise, all of that. But I was having blood sugar crashes where I would get dizzy. I fell down several times because I was so dizzy. I was so nauseous because I was so, like, my blood sugar was crashing. And then I couldn't eat because I was so nauseous. And, like, my relationship with my body was miserable at this skinny little healthy weight. And now I'm like 25 pounds heavier than that. And which is hard to believe because I look in the mirror and I'm like, where are those 25 pounds? Like, where? I don't get it. But now I don't have blood sugar crashes. Now I'm a size 12 and I feel amazing, like, diet culture is one of those pieces that I think could stand to have Pluto throw a bunch of it in the fire and just like Dude, we could do so much better when it comes to really embodying what health even is. And I think Andrea nails it on the head here as far as like listening to our body and doing and being what brings it joy, what feels good to us rather than what looks good on the outside to other people, right? So health is a tangled up topic, and hopefully this is, maybe one of the things that Pluto and the sun coming together could really do some work on around the cultural limitations of what is healthy and all of the fat phobia that comes out of that, all the body shaming that comes out of that, all everything that's just like so fucking toxic and standing in the way of the self-empowerment of the individual to be who the individual is. Like I see on the other side of Virgo season after these 30 days that we are more individually empowered inside of our body and doing the best that we can, being the healthiest version of ourselves, not necessarily following the recipe that's presented to us. Ooh, what is my favorite birth chart app or website? So I use astro.com to pull charts. I have also, gosh, what is that one called? I think it's like, has Astro in the name. That doesn't help us at all. Has a purple app and it's like a navigation thing. I had it on my old phone and um, I did not download it onto my new phone. Otherwise, I would look up the name of it for you. But I'll see if I can find the name of that and put it in there because that was really good. I really liked how um, they did transit astrology for you. So like let's say it was the sun transit or the transit sun was opposing your sun. So it would tell you when that was, and it would have a little write up about like what the sun opposite your sun was. So it was like you could kind of follow the the specific impact on your energy. I'll definitely link that down below. It was a really good app. And then the other one that comes to mind is Karen Black's website. I have been on a million times. I really love she mostly focuses into the North and South node. And so she has articles written on her website for each of the different North node signs. I believe there's different articles. I could be mistaken about that though, for the North node houses. But yeah, I'll link all of those in the description when I go back through and do my timestamps and stuff for this. Um, so I think that is the end of what is in the chat. I thank you guys so much for hanging out with me for this. I would love to hear down below what your favorite part was, what you're looking forward to most in Virgo season. If I missed any of the keywords that are your favorites for Virgo, leave those down in the description or down in the comments, and we'll have a little chat. Um, yeah, take a second and like the video, subscribe. Maybe I said that. I don't know. And until next time, I hope you'll take such good care of yourselves. And so will I. Okay. Okay. Bye.